I'm reading this morning from Romans chapter 10, verses 13 to 17, and also Psalm 23. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. How then can they call on the one they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one of whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And how can anyone preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. But not all the Israelites accepted the good news, for Isaiah says, Lord, who has believed our message? Consequently, faith comes from hearing the message, and the message is heard through the word about Christ. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
All right. Good morning. I want to start by thanking you guys for your support over the years, for your prayers. We couldn't do what we do in Papua New Guinea or here in Australia if it weren't for people like yourselves. So thank you very much for allowing the Lord to use you in the way he has and for your support and prayers. We really do appreciate it. It took us a while to get up here. And there's reasons behind that. As I'll explain in my message, things were a little difficult for us over the last few years. So today, I want to start by giving you guys a bit of an update on where Robin and I are at, what we're doing here in Australia for now, and what we're going to be doing in the future, as much as we know what we're going to be doing. And then I've got a video that I'm going to show. And I want to talk a little bit more about missions and about what we do over in Papua New Guinea, what New Tribes does, and the importance of it. So we'll get started there. The two passages I chose, the one, Matthew, it was quite obvious why I chose that one. How do people hear about God if it's not for us? How do they even know about God if it's not for missionaries, for Christians who go out there and tell the world? And that Christian world is getting much, much smaller. It feels like you can go out in the streets here in Australia now and find people who have never even heard about God, which, gone are the days where every kid went to Sunday school, whether you were a church-going family or not. It was a good thing to send your kid to Sunday school, and we don't tend to do that anymore. We send them to the skate parks, and we send them to the other places that they can entertain themselves, basically. So people need to hear about God. And the only way they can do that is through people like yourselves and us. And the second passage, Psalm 23, I chose. It's not really the normal passage missionaries use, but we've just gone through a series in our church down in Sydney on Psalm 23, the first chunk of it, and just breaking it down and seeing how the Lord really does look after us through everything. And even though it may not seem like he's looking after us at the time, he really is. We don't know what he's protecting us from. Trials and hardships may be upon us and may be happening, but how worse would it have been if God weren't there looking after us, holding our hands and carrying us through those situations? And what is he teaching us through it? So I thought that was a really cool, and it'll fit into the talk as we go along a little bit better. But I came to really appreciate Psalm 23 over the past few months as I preached on it last week, and then or on a portion of it, and then the pastor also did. So Robin and I have been back in Australia now for just over a year. And it's crazy because normally it's 8 weeks, whirlwind tour of Australia. And we'll come back and quickly run around and visit all the different churches and then head back to PNG to continue our ministry. And normally, both Robin and I are still fully involved in our PNG ministries when we come over here. This time was a little bit different. Number one, we were planning on bringing the boys back and getting them established into this crazy world. It's a very different world to what they grew up in. They, like myself and like Robin, grew up on the mission field. Logan was 4 years old, I think, when we went to Papua New Guinea. He's now 20. Where's time go? So it's we wanted to really be deliberate about how we brought them back and what we let them loose into. They've had some fantastic teaching over the years. They know the Lord, they trust the Lord, they want to serve the Lord, but we've all seen how this world can eat people up. And so we wanted to make sure that we set them off on the right path, and we really helped them to get going properly. Ronan hadn't graduated when we left PNG. He had just finished 11th grade, and he decided we talked to him, and we decided that coming over here and trying to finish the Australian system wasn't going to work very well. It's an American system over there, international system, very different to the Australian. He's a very smart kid, but it was just going to be a very challenging year. So he decided to go into the real world. And so he got a job with CRU, the Christian, I don't know what it stands for. Crusade. Yeah, they don't call them Crusaders anymore. They got rid of it because it was too Christian-y. Like, not in a bad way, but schools didn't want to use them because of that. So he's working with CRU and loving it. He gets paid to go rock climbing and abseiling and normal sailing just across the lake in Lake Macquarie there. And he calls it work. The rest of us laugh at him. But he's doing fantastic. He's being taught the word. They're doing like a Bible school with him, as well as teaching him to do these different things. He'll end up with a certificate in outdoor education and all sorts of other certificates. His desire is to continue serving the Lord in one way or another, and we thought this is a great way to do that. It was one of those things that with Ronan particularly, being a little bit younger than Logan, we just weren't sure what we were going to do with it, where he was going to go, and the Lord really worked that out. Logan's in university doing nursing and loving it, and so he's about to start doing his practical, I think this month in a hospital, and he's doing really well there. And then Kiana's homeschooling still with us, and she loves it when I'm home. She does, but she's a typical girl. And so we've been able to get the kids established, and we're loving seeing how the Lord's using them and teaching them and growing them in this culture, in a different culture. In fact, Robin and I were just talking the other night. We went for a walk and talking about how when we came back at similar ages to them, that kind of going from the mission field to Australia and that learning to live in this culture. And it's now our kids' turn, and that's just crazy. So the Lord's used this time to help us get our kids sort of established in the world. It's very different to our friends whose kids have grown up in the school here and they've seen things develop, and there's good and bad in that. We love the fact that our kids really are grounded in the Word, and they really do. They see some of the things that the kids here have become kind of almost numb to, and our kids see it and go, well, that's not right. And we're like, yeah. So we're praising the Lord for that. And we still got some things to do with them and to try and help them, but we're loving the time with them as young adults and teaching them. Robin and I, things look a little different for myself, not very different for Robin. So I got a job at Busways, driving big old buses, and did that for a good part of the year. I think I worked out I was clocking up over 5,000 kilometers a month driving. So just a couple. probably more than I've done in the last 14 years in Papua New Guinea. But so I was driving with busways, and then recently I got a job at a Christian school, coordinating their buses, and they have 8 buses, and then driving for them as well, which is fantastic. It's given me the time to not only get a little extra funds to support the family, but just get a breather. And then Robin's still continuing in her ministry, very vital ministry, doing the purchasing for Papua New Guinea, so she's pretty busy doing that. In fact, we just spoke to one of the directors who were expressing how vital what she does is and how appreciative they are of her being able to continue doing that. So when you guys support us, that's what you're doing. You're supporting Robin being able to keep the New Tribes mission supplied with the things they need to keep going, whether it be bush materials for building churches or missionaries' houses or Bibles, things like that. So she's flat out busy doing that. So like I said, mine looks a little different, and there's a reason behind that. So for the last year of being in Papua New Guinea, last couple years really, over the COVID period, it got very difficult for those of us in leadership and those of us who were kind of over everything. We lost a lot of missionaries over the time. They had to go home due to the Papua New Guinea shutting down. And those of us who remained behind ended up taking on more and more and more. So I myself had 4 full-time jobs over probably a 3-year period. I ran security for the whole country. I ran one of our biggest centers, the one with the school and medical clinic and all that, looked after that, made sure it was functioning, as well as running the tech services department and then being an advisor and leadership on the leadership team. And over that time, unbeknownst to me and Robin, my, I don't know what you'd call it, but I slowly got beat down, burnt out. And I didn't recognize it until pretty close to the end. And probably about 6 months before we came home, I crashed. I just had nothing left. I remember coming home to Robin and just saying, I'm done. I can't keep going. Which is very unusual for me because I'm a go-getter. I usually power on regardless. And somebody says, hey, you got 4 jobs. Do you want to take on another? Yes. And that was a mistake. The Lord used us to get us through COVID and to get us through those times. But it became very apparent to us that I needed a break. I needed to take a breath. And then on top of that, just living in Papua New Guinea, your stress level goes up about 1/3. That's just being there. So with all the crime, with all that, making sure your family's safe, everything like that, it just adds one thing after the other. In the last 2 years, I've dealt with hostage situations and kidnappings, armed holdups, break-in entries, the list goes on. And so we got to a place where we just went, it's time to take a proper break. 8 weeks isn't going to cut it. Number 1, we want to get our kids settled. And number 2, if I keep pushing, it's going to ruin my family. It's going to ruin our ministry opportunities, whether it's in PNG or here. It's going to ruin everything. And so we prayed a lot, talked to leadership there, and we decided to come home for, at the time it was a year, and just catch our breath. Since being home, I don't know if any of you have been through a burnout, but it takes a little while. You think you're doing all right, and something happens. And so we extended that, and so we're going to be home until June, July next year, 2025, at this point. We honestly don't know what the Lord has for us in the future, whether he actually wants us to go back to Papua New Guinea or stick it out here. And that's partly why I was asked about the preaching side of things, about pastoring. It's something else that I can do. I have the training, I have the desire, and the Lord can use us. So I'm pursuing that just in case. We love the mission field, we love Papua New Guinea, and we love serving the Lord full time. I don't want to go back to a 9-to-5 job. Kind of what I'm doing right now. It's a Christian school, beautiful kids, beautiful staff, love working there, and there is real ministry involved in it. it's just not quite what I'm used to. It's not what I feel the Lord has for us. It's my comfort zone, definitely my comfort zone. It's easy. But I don't feel necessarily that that's what the Lord has for us right now. So, he has it for us right now. So I'm continuing that, and we're just seeking the Lord to see what he has for us next. Our hope is that Robin can continue to do the purchasing role for P&G instead of having to go and get a part-time job. You know what Sydney's like? Cheapest place in the world to live, right? Yeah. So, it is a two-employment world. Both partners have to have it. And right now, Robin's able to continue her ministry because of support from people like yourselves and continue supporting the P&G field in the way she does. And our hope is that we can continue to do that for a little while, whether we go back to P&G or not. But we are just consulting the Lord and talking to him, consulting the leadership over in P&G and seeing what God has for us. And we're excited to see what he has for us next, whether it's the same old thing or something brand new. But we are learning that he's got us. Psalm 23 is true. He does take us through the valley. We're going to go through it. He's just there next to us. And that's exciting to be able to have him beside us and be a rest in him and be confident that he's got us. I love that poem, The Footprints in the Sand. I don't know if you've all heard it, but where you see the two sets of footprints and then all of a sudden it disappears and it's just one. That's because God's carrying us in those times. And so I love that. So that's where Robin and I and the kids are at. The kids are crazy big. The boys are almost as tall as me. They think they're taller than me. We all know that's a lie. That's why I wear these boots. No, they're pretty much almost at my height, and then Kiana's getting there. She's not going to be as tall, so I got a 20-year-old, 18-year-old, and Kiana's 16. So crazy. But they're down there involved in different church things right now. So I want to transition now from Robin and I, and into more what's going on the mission field. COVID was a crazy time in Papua New Guinea, but the Lord didn't stop things from happening there. We continued to see people being reached. We continued to see missionaries being able to get out there into the bush and teach people. And that was fantastic. And Papua New Guinea really struggled with COVID. It hit hard. They didn't have the medical facilities we had here. And so it did affect Papua New Guinea in a big way, but God was more powerful. And he did some pretty awesome things, and we saw churches planted, and we saw new work started. And so I have a video that I'm going to show. This is a video of the Pei tribe. They started about 2 years, I think, after we started in Amdu, and the missionaries moved in there. And they've had some struggles along the way, some medical struggles, particularly this one family, but the other families have too. But this is particularly about Chris and Evie Jones and the struggles they've had. And yet, through these struggles and through these hardships, they've persisted and continued to see that the Pei people are reached. And they're back in there right now and going strong, despite the fact that, and he'll explain a little bit of what's happened, but despite the fact that pretty big things happened that would have taken people off the field, and they've stuck it out. And so I want to show that video, and then I'll talk a little bit further about that. So if you guys want to hit the video. It's called the story of, I think it's the story of Rose. Forgot the name. But it's about a little girl in there too.
Like, I guess after World War II, Australia was super involved in Papua New Guinea. Sometimes they would grab a couple of these tribal guys who wanted to go, right? This wasn't against their will or anything, and take them with them on their patrols, to take them back to town usually. And that's where they would teach them the trade language. Some of them would learn how to read and write. So one of these guys, his name was Eric. He went out there, and if you can imagine transplanting a tribal person into the middle of this town, what are the most prominent, coolest, most amazing things he would see? It's the big, humongous churches. Their jaws drop when they see that stuff. They're like, how do I get that into my village? That's what I want. That would make us like the coolest people on the river. So Eric talks with his buddies. His buddies are like, oh, well, there's these things called missions. And they love putting churches in villages. And they love translating the Bible. And so he shows up at our missions base in this town and he drops off a letter. He's like, hey, can you put one of these churches in our village? Can you translate the Bible? We would love to hear God's talk in our language. So every time he comes to town, dude, another letter, drops it off. Another letter drops it off. And so now, our mission knows about this place called Pei. So then, come 2011, me and my wife show up, and there's a stack of letters from this guy asking for missionaries to come into Pei. Our missions leadership, they've been there long enough to kind of strategize and hey, we should go into these places next. They put Pei on the board and are like, hey, if there's people who've learned the trade language and are ready to move into a tribal location, start doing ministry there, maybe you guys should consider Pei. We open up the file and there's this stack of letters. We're like, okay, yeah, let's go check this place out. And so we cruise up the river. Hey guys, you want us to live here with you? And they're like, yeah, come on. And that's basically the story of how we got into Pei. We finally cruise in there, and we're ready to start doing this work. And that guy's dead. He'd been dead for 2 years. But his family's all still around. Eric's wife, her name is Tokas, and her daughter is Rose. His wife, she ends up becoming a believer. And his 2 kids are probably the sharpest people in the whole tribe. They took to literacy amazingly. They're just so sharp. It's just, they have this degenerative nerve disease. And so the 2 smartest people in our tribe, probably. Amazing readers, really smart, intelligent. They can't really talk well. They can't really walk well. We have to help them to every single Bible teaching class, to every single literacy class. We're piggyback riding them all the way to the classroom. For me, it was really kind of hard to tell where they were at. Do they understand these stories? Do they believe these stories? My coworker's daughter, she made this little chart with all of the syllables in our language. And Paisley sits down with Rose and is asking her all these questions and helping her spell things out with this chart, her hand that kind of works. And it's just amazing. She's totally tracking. She's still sticking in there. And her brother is in the same bad shape, but they are both believers. And that's the kids of the guy who wrote all these letters, asking us to come. And so that's amazing to see. That guy's wife and 2 of his kids at least. Sometimes God just kind of throws you a bone. It's I'm here, just to remind you. It is super encouraging just to hear stories about Tokas, Eric's wife, kind of processing some of this stuff. My coworkers obviously have spent more time with the believers than I have, having been sick and stuff. When they report back to me, they love just hearing Tokas and Esta and all of these ladies just pray. They just get such a kick out of that because they're praying for just small things that God would feed them another day, that they would find bananas, or that their gardens would carry, or that the water wouldn't wash away their garden. But just that they're giving that to the Lord, it's apparent that they see themselves as part of this story. They are inhabiting this story that we told them, that God's word lays out. And that, I don't know, that's a beautiful thing. But at the end of the day, dude, when I lay my head down on my moldy pillow in the jungle, I'm you know what? How many times just this week have I really just had to lean on the Lord just to pay my bills, just to keep me out here? I sold out to do this thing. And I'm so lucky that I get to experience God like this. And how many people don't get to do that? Like I said, I'm so fortunate. I'm so thankful. As much as I hate the jungle, that's kind of why we do this, It's just to elevate the Lord. I think about Rose, Eric's daughter. She can kind of nod and she can kind of move her eyes and her arms a little bit. She wets herself all the time. There's nobody taking care of her, really. My wife, she goes and talks with her sometimes, and she was reading the Bible to Rose in her language and telling Rose that she's going to get a new body, just to see Rose's eyes light up, at that end to her suffering, hope, the light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know, that pumps me up too. I'm not alone in my suffering. Rose is suffering too, and there is an end to it. And if Rose can maintain her faith, God is elevated because God is in that suffering with her. He'll be elevated when she gets a new body, that's for sure.
Chris, the guy who was talking there, they moved in there at the same time as the other 2 couples. So there's a single lady, the Reeses and the Joneses. The Joneses, they moved in there, and Chris stepped on a stick a little bit after they'd got in there. that just scratched up the back of his leg. And he almost had to have his leg amputated. We had to medevac him to Australia, and he spent months and months, I think it was actually almost a year, trying to recover from that. And then it came back again after they'd thought it had healed up, and it came back again. And so they almost amputated his leg. He's had a huge amount of physiotherapy to get him back to where he can function, where he can walk around the bush and the jungle. So they were pulled out of there, and then they've gone back. The Reeses, Justin's allergic to everything in the bush. He's got rashes, and I don't know if you saw, he was speaking in one section there, and he was scratching himself. And he just breaks out in these horrible rashes all the time. Many people would just go, not worth it. I'm out. I'm gone. But Rose is a Christian now, and her brother are Christians because they've stuck it out, because the Lord's used them despite our weaknesses and our frailnesses, despite the burnouts, despite the massive injuries up the back of the leg. He's used them anyway. And it's really awesome, and it's really exciting to see that it's not about us. It's not about me and what I can do. I can't tell you how many churches I've gone into where people say, oh, I couldn't do what you do. I didn't almost lose a leg. Chris did, and he's still doing it. I'm not scratching the skin off of my body because I'm so itchy. Justin does, but he's doing it. We can do whatever it is the Lord asks us to do, because it's not about you and me. It's not our strength. It's not our abilities. It's not our anything. It's Him. And people like Rose and her brother, her mom, they wouldn't be standing alongside us in heaven if it weren't people like Chris and Justin and Candace who are willing to go through the hard times. They've had that where they live, crime is pretty bad. They've had some pretty major issues with crime. They've had massive floods come right up under the floorboards of their houses. They're terrible builders, so their houses almost fell down. I had to send a team in to prop them up. They really are terrible builders. They're typical, what is it, Y-gen, I guess it is now. And the houses that they stood up were a far cry from sound. They've been through their fair share of trials, and they're not alone in it. So many of our missionaries have endured crazy, crazy things. We have a pilot who lost his leg due to a drunk driver. And he went home and he got a prosthetic and he learned how to fly again, and he's on the mission, or he was on the mission field. They've left since, but flying. God is an awesome God, and He can use us, whether it's here in Cessnock or in Sydney or in Papua New Guinea or elsewhere in the world. Don't ever say, I couldn't do it, because I promise you, you can if God wants you to, and if you trust Him to help you through it. And it's worth it. It's worth it for people like Rose, who there is absolutely no way Rose could have traveled out to town and heard about the word. Somebody had to go to her. But God gave her the faculties. He gave her the brain to be able to learn the scriptures. And she's a believer now. He may not have given her the legs and the arms and the ability to walk around, but He gave her what she needed. And she's a believer. And there's so many others. In Amdu, where we worked, there's now, I would say, 30 plus believers in there. When we went in there, none. And now we're seeing that grow, and we're seeing the excitement, and we're seeing and Amdu is a difficult place to do it. It's up in the top of the mountains, and the people are cannibals. And so it's exciting to be able to sit back and, number one, to be able to say, we were part of that. And when I say we, I mean you guys too. By supporting Robin and I, by supporting God's work in Papua New Guinea, you're part of Rose being a believer. Okay? So it's not just about the people over there. It's about us. It's about how we can be serving God. I preached last week on It was a bit of Psalm 23, but I went into Baruch in Song of Solomon and talked through how he complained because him and Solomon's ministry was miserable. Solomon's whole job was to tell Israel that if you don't turn back to God, you're doomed. Jeremiah, sorry, not Solomon. I didn't do a very good job preaching, apparently, because I forgot it already, but hopefully somebody else listened. Jeremiah, thank you. Jeremiah, his whole ministry was telling Israel, turn back to God or you're doomed. Baruch was part of that. And at one point, Baruch complained. He said, God, you just keep heaping burdens on me and making it hard for me. What's the deal? And God turned around to him and he said, Baruch, is this about you or me? It's that simple. Is it about me or is it about God? Is the struggles, should I give up because it's hard, because I burned out? It may mean I don't do what God had me doing before because I'm not able to or whatever. Doesn't mean I stop serving God because it's about Him. And because when we are obeying God, He's going to look after us. He's going to take care of us through the trials, through the struggles, through the hardships, through almost losing your leg. So my encouragement to you is get involved in missions. Get involved in God's work, whether it's right here in Cessnock through this church, whether it's supporting missionaries, whether it's going out there and doing it, but do it and do it well and do it with everything you got. At work, don't stop telling people about God. Through your life, don't be one person on a Sunday and another on a Monday. Be that Christian. Show who God is through your life. It's worth it. It's about Him, not us. I don't know if I've used this example here before, and I wasn't planning on using it, but it just came to mind. Isn't God good? Francis Chan does this example where he gets up on stage, he has this massive rope, big white rope, and he tapes off a little tiny bit at the end. And he shows how long this rope is, and he says, this is eternity. And he picks up the little black end, and he says, this is life here on earth. This is our life. What are you preparing for? And so often we focus on that little black tip, don't we? So often that's where we put all our time and our effort and our focus and our money instead of all eternity. And my challenge is focus on eternity. Make life about God, about what He has planned out. Life will be over really soon. For some of us, sooner than others. Let's not make that the most important thing. Let's make eternity the most important thing. Let's make God's work here on this earth. Let's see a revival in Australia, in Cessnock, in Sydney. Let's see the church rise up and say, no, this is about Him, this is for Him. We're not going to sit idle anymore. We're going to celebrate God, and we're going to make it obvious. And you can laugh at us all you want. But we got a big God. So whether we're on the mission field, whether here in Cessnock, whether in Sydney, serve the Lord. Put everything you have into Him. Give Him all your time, all your effort. Don't settle for a 9-to-5 job. Do your 9-to-5 job, but do it for Him. Bring Him the glory. Because that's what we're here for. To God be the glory. That's our purpose, glorifying God. And we don't do that when we settle for 9-to-5. We don't do that when we're one person on Sunday and another on Monday. So, that's what I have for you today. Thank you again for your part in our ministry. Thank you again for your prayers and for having us here today. We love being able to get out and talk to people. Like I said, I'm practicing being a pastor, so we'll see how the Lord goes with that one. But we are excited to see what the Lord has for us next, and we'll keep you guys posted. I'll make sure Robin writes newsletters. I don't write them. I get credit for them. That's the good thing. Super like, good newsletter, Dave. I'm like, thank you. It was all Robin. But if you say anything about that, I'll deny it. It'll just me. But yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, I'll be praying for you guys in your walk with the Lord and in your ministries here in Cessnock. It's exciting to see the church growing. And I ask that you continue to pray for us in whatever it is the Lord has for us. Thank you, and have a great week.